thank you so much for joining us today. Just to give our lovely host a little introduction, my name is Hannah and I'm a third year student at U of C in natural science. With me today, I have Miles and Ryan. Miles, do you want to give yourself a little introduction?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Miles. I'm a fourth year political science student at the University of Calgary, and I've been involved with YCR since about April of this year.
Perfect. And Ryan?
I have been with YCR for about a year now. I'm based in Ottawa right now at the University of Ottawa, finishing a fourth year double major in criminology and political science.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. And so welcome back to YCR's Food for Thought series. For anyone that is just seeing our Food for Thought for the first time, we are an advocacy group made by students and young professionals for students and young professionals, and we believe that Canada can have a strong future in resources, the economy, and the environment. Please connect with us on social media at any time if you want to learn more about what we do. Joining us today, we have the lovely Candace MacGibbon. Candace is a CPA and CA with over 25 years of experience in the mining sector and capital markets. She was formerly the CEO and director of INV Metals Inc, a Canadian mineral resource company focused on the development and exploration of the Loma Larga gold property in Ecuador, which was acquired by Dundee Precious Metals Inc in July of 2021. Currently, she is the director of Osisko Gold Royalties and Carbon Streaming Corporation. Ms. MacGibbon is also a former director of Cobalt 27 Capital Corporation and Nickel 28 Capital Corporation. Ms. MacGibbon is passionate about the Canadian resource sector and is embarking upon a journey to advocate and promote the mining, energy, and agricultural sectors at a national level. Her goal is to convey the benefits of the resource sector and to inform its role in the transition to a carbon neutral economy. Her objective is to liaise with senior leaders and policymakers within the sectors to promote the progressive efforts made by Canadian companies, the challenges facing the industries, and common public misconceptions. Ms. MacGibbon has significant financial, technical, government relations, along with communications and environmental, social, and government experience. Ms. MacGibbon also has a deep understanding of the capital markets, including her previous employment as a global mining institutional salesperson with RBC Capital Markets, and in base metals research as a mining associate with BMO Capital Markets. Ms. MacGibbon is a chartered professional accountant, and her financial accounting experience includes her previous role as CFO of INV Metals Inc, as well as her prior employment with Deloitte, hopefully I pronounced that right, LLP. Ms. MacGibbon was born in Sudbury and currently resides in Toronto, Ontario. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just before I hand the floor over, please know that attendees are encouraged to ask questions throughout the presentation just using the Q&A box below, and we'll address all of these at the end of the session. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll get out of your way here and let you share your screen.
Thanks, Hannah. If I'd known whether or not if you were going to read it word for word, I could have provided you the abridged version. But thank you for that. And so can you see my screen? I will just put it into presentation mode.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, thank you for today. Thanks for having me. Before I move on, I want to say that I am so pleased and encouraged by the work that you do and by the fact that your young students and young professionals actually are having a conversation about how important resources are to our future. And that includes not just a future for Canada, but a future for the world as we transition into the global goals towards our net zero. We don't have everything that we use in our daily lives, including the computers that we are using to deal with this technology, including the desk we sit on, everything is as a result of mining. And I think that where we have to get to is that we must inform our colleagues, our friends, everyone that we know that that is the case, because people tend to think that we live in a Star Trek generation world where things just materialize from Amazon or from the store, and they don't really think where it came from, that someone had to mine, someone had to grow, someone had to create these things that we utilize. That is, and therein lies the topic for this presentation, I had written an article for the National Post in advance of the PDAC this year. And that's what prompted you to reach out with regards to the title, which was a little bit sensational. Canadians need to stop demonizing mining. And I think that really can be extrapolated to the world. The world needs to stop demonizing mining. We are not the problem. We are part of the solution. And it has been very, very easy for the narrative to be written for mining, for us, over the past 20 years. And I'll get into the reasons historically as to why. But right now, we need to really focus as an industry on those discussions which need to happen so that we can change the perception and we can change the narrative. And we need to recognize that there were wrongs committed in the past. There are technical failures at dams, which never should have happened. People's lives have been lost for safety instances, which never should happen. And as professionals in this industry, we need to do better. However, things are not the same as they were 20 years ago with regards to technology. We have come a long way. It's now time for us to talk about that narrative. And that's where we'll get into with this presentation. But that really is the backdrop as to why and how I'm working to try to get people having this conversation. So I appreciate the invite today. And if we could just high level persuade Canadians to stop being ashamed of the resources that we have and start to realize that we can develop them responsibly and be a world leader in that, really set the bar for the environmental regulations, really set the bar for the technological innovations. And that, of course, doesn't only apply to mines here in Canada, but that applies to operators who are Canadian based, who are listed on our stock exchanges, who work abroad. We can really, really take the lead here. And to do that, we also need to start communicating. We need to start talking. So the top challenges facing the mining industry, here's a list of really important, apologies, I went too far, of really important challenges that we're facing. It is a very challenging industry right now for people who are in it, for people who are financing it, for those. Now, I rank perception of the mining industry #1. And here's why. The geopolitical and social risks that are associated with projects are often cited as the #1 risk, which they are. However, it all relates to the perception that the communities have and that the perception that the governments have and the conversation and the narrative that exists in existence today and will be in existence tomorrow and 5 years from now when the mine gets built. We need to work on perception. We need to work on that narrative for what does mining do? How can it be helpful to your community? How does it contribute to the tax base of a country? How can it help with regards to exports and your trade balance and all those types of things? So that when it comes time to deal with the geopolitical and social risks, you have an environment that you can actually build a mine. We'll get into it. Geopolitical and social risks and perception are everywhere. People assume that Canada is a good place to build a mine. Canada is just as hard, if not harder, to build a mine than any other country in the world. And the years of underinvestment and lack of available financing are a result of the change in perception, the change in the social and geopolitical risks, the change that mining is, that narrative that has been written that mining is bad, mining will hurt our community, mining shouldn't be in our backyard, all of that type of thing, which of course has led to the lack of permanent projects in the pipeline. Rising costs due to inflation are a massive problem. However, I would say from a systemic perspective, that's being recognized by consumers. Consumers understand they're going to have to pay more for their cell phone. And if you have an Apple phone, well, you just have to pay a fortune anyway. So, hey, what's another $100? I say that in jest because another $100 is a massive increase in a product that is pivotal to our daily lives. We will see that. And that'll then mean higher prices in the future for these raw materials. And it also means that we have to pay workers more. We have a general cost increase, which really, really moves towards this being a difficult business. And the skills void, labor shortages, and succession planning, I hope that you guys are working towards that, right? With your with your schools, with people who are there doing engineering and geo and then the natural sciences and the earth sciences. And we need people like you guys in poli-science so that you create policy in this country when you come out that actually works in the creating the policy that's required, albeit stringent regulations, so that we can actually get projects permitted. It is absolutely imperative that we are talking to each other. So I love the fact that you have different backgrounds here and that you're working together to move the needle on where we need to get to. Okay, so there is just a lack of public awareness. I would just want to start there. I think that we just, do your friends understand what and how, where we get our stuff from, all our stuff? Probably not. I mean, it's very hard for us to understand the magnitude of what is mined and how it's mined, and to look at a couch and understand that, look, the raw materials that go into that are petrochemicals, cotton, and wood, perhaps some steel, all of which come from resources. We need to make sure that we talk to people who live in urban areas who are not beside a mine and let them understand just the pivotal role these industries play. The negative perception that our industry has had has been, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but we haven't controlled the narrative because we haven't been bold enough to actually speak up with what the good work that we do. Yes, there's historic evils. Yes, there are situations where communities and companies have been at odds. We need to get better at telling the good stories because they are plentiful and they are out there, and we're not very good at that as an industry. And just with regards to perception in general, this figure, this 26 tons of raw materials per year per person in a country like Canada is incredible. It's an incredible statistic, like 26 2,000-pound elephants that we each consume. Now, most of that is in your aggregate with concrete type things, but to recognize that raw materials and mining plays the basis for everything in society is imperative. We need to start the education. And critical minerals are going to be absolutely the savior for clean energy. Clean energy needs to be stored. It has to have we don't have a base load of necessarily of clean energy. The sun does not shine all the time. The wind does not blow all the time. So we need to be able to store it when that energy is available, and to do that we need batteries. All of those things need additional metals. We can't substitute that right now. We may be able to. There may be something in the future that is better as far as that goes, but it's not here yet. We don't have the technology. We need the innovation. We need the metals. And please take all your friends into the challenge and try to figure out the Star Trek thing that just materializes out of oxygen and hydrogen, because there's lots of that around. But until we get there, we need to mine. And it is my strong hope that eventually mining is not politicized, that this is a manufacturing industry. It is regulated as such, it is heavily regulated with heavily stringent environmental procedures, but that it is not about being for or against. It is just about, this is what we need. This is how we remediate. This is how we recycle. If we're going to take it out of the ground, make sure it's been used plentifully and reuse and reuse and reuse. And it's our responsibility as leaders to advocate for our own industry, because if we're expecting young people to have a career in this industry and to be the leaders of tomorrow, we have to explain why it's a good industry, why we can help, why we are part of the change. And I think there's an exciting career here to be part of this change, but it is on us to be able to explain that to young people like you. There we go. Okay, so the good news is the perception is improving. You will read in the papers articles on critical minerals. Critical minerals are a very hot topic right now. Now, if you look at Justin Trudeau's comment at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2016, he said, my predecessor wanted you to know Canada for its resources. I want you to know Canadians for our resourcefulness. Now, that was telling, right? Resources are passé. Resources are never passé. We need resources in our daily lives. Full stop. We need them. We have to mine them. we have to be responsible for them. So fast forward 6 years, and Christopher Friedland was talking about critical minerals and their necessity in green energy. This is important. This is a policy shift. Same party. It's critical that we see this trend in change for perception and for policy. And so this is helpful. And as we move on and then drill down on the actual public in Canada, and in Ipsos poll that the Mining Association of Canada created, found recently, this was this year, that 7 in 10 Canadians almost agree that we should be the global supplier of oil and gas during times of crisis. We are responsible. And 80% of those interviewed in an Abacus poll felt that we need a strong mining sector. Now, that is good news. That means that whoever was polled believes that Canada can mine. This, however, doesn't translate into what's happening in the industry with investment. The forecast for capital investment in the mining industry over the next 10-year period, from a couple of years ago to 2030, is an investment of 82 billion. That's nearly 50% below the 160 billion that was invested in 2014 alone. That is incredible. So what you're seeing is that companies, even though the perception is that Canada should be a good mining jurisdiction, the systemic issues surrounding all of the issues with building mines and getting extensions of mines are very real, and investment is not going back into the country or abroad. We need to change this. Now, what I would say is critical minerals and the fact that we are so attentive to the net zero goals in 2050 is helping. It'll help policy, it'll help the conversation, it'll help all that. So that's good news. The bad news is it still takes 10 to 20 years to build a mine. We're in 2022. If we need to find all this mine and all these mines and deposits and say we found them tomorrow, which isn't logical nor we're not able to do that. We're looking at 2042 before we get production. And I'll show you the demand growth that's required. It's unprecedented. So there's a disconnect here, which I think we need to start the conversation. We need to have the conversation on the news. We need to have the conversation in the paper. We need to say, look, we support resources. As long as it's sustainable and accountable, and companies that are sustainable and accountable should be able to chat with us about what your concerns are, where we need to go, and how we can do it responsibly. So there's an inertia, and if we, Canada, want to capitalize on being the most amazing nation in the world, which I believe we are, with regards to our people, our ethics, our values, our resources, we need to start talking. So the narrative needs to improve. How do we do it? When you're talking to your friends, when you're talking to your colleagues, when you're talking about mining resources, the public mining companies are incredibly regulated. I can't tell you the type of reports we needed to write, we needed to audit, all of those types of things, just in order to be listed on a stock exchange. Now, we cannot provide inaccurate information to any of our stakeholders or our partners. And all of the things that we provide cannot be misleading, or people like me go to jail. Now, contrast that with how the narrative has been written. A lot of the anti-mining groups have absolutely no qualms about putting all hands barred, the gloves on, and they are there to fearmonger. They are there to provide misleading information. And I have seen firsthand with intimidation and bold out red lies. So for instance, for a pamphlet to be drawn up about an underground open pit, an underground, very small footprint mine with a massive, massive picture of the super pit in Australia. So trying to get the public to completely think that 3 kilometers of their earth is going to be dug up and there's going to be a major pit when it's a football field sized processing plant and very, 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 very responsibly and environmentally sound mine. That type of thing is very hard to combat because mining companies haven't historically been equipped to say you're wrong or that's misleading or those types of things. We need to get better at that. We need to call out the misinformation when it's distributed specifically. That's my opinion. Now, it's not to say that that will be what everybody does, but if we don't do that, then the probability of permitting your mine and the probability of getting your social license to operate is, in my opinion, low. We need to have a very serious dialogue about the fears people have when this is in their backyard, when we are asking for communities to trust us. What are the scary parts of mining? How will you stop and make sure that our water sources are not contaminated? Or what is your tailings dam? I mean, I heard about Brazil. Is that going to happen in my situation? All of those things need to be communicated. We need to talk. And that's my hope here, is that mining companies start to talk. They start to address the misinformation, the lies. We're going to need to use our social media. I mean, mining companies have not historically been tweeters. Now you'll see, we all have or have had our Instagram accounts, I'm probably maybe Twitter, but definitely a repository of information, which is real time, that we can respond to people with complaints, with questions, all of that type of thing. It can be very powerful if we harness it. Our critics are, so we have to utilize the medium and opportunity we have there. You all know that most of your information likely comes from social media. And we have to consult widely. We need to start being better at that. Now, the issue there is cost. Junior mining companies don't have a lot of money. So how do we do that? How do we do it effectively? All that type of thing. And I think from that perspective, we just need to work together. We need to get together. And we need the governments on board with that. So geopolitical risk. This goes to the perception. This goes to the opportunity to go off the rails. Baffinland has a major operation up in Nunavut. And they just this week, I believe, or maybe last week, November 17th, when was that, last week, were denied their permit for expansion to double their production. Now, I mean, regardless of getting into the specifics as to this, but iron ore, we need to make steel. As far as I'm concerned, whether or not it's nickel for a battery, steel is probably a critical some metal to our economy, right? Steel, it's Canada. And after a 4-year consultation and various Inuit objections, they were denied their expansion. Now, I highlight this not to say whether or not that's correct or not, because I'm not familiar with the details. Why I highlight it is that the best place to build a mine is beside a mine. And the best source of capital is for expansions, right? You've already sunk the capital where you are. You already have the skilled workforce. It's better for the world to have one site which produces more than create another site, and plus from the time perspective. So it's best to have these types of things approved as we are looking forward. Nickel mines that can produce more, copper mines that can produce more. Now, the door isn't closed here. They have to go back to the table. If they can prove that they can do it environmentally sound, etc., they will. But it's already been 4 years. So I highlight the critical and the issue here with the timing of new projects. Imagine if you're doing a new project in an area where you don't have any information. How long is it going to take? Hence, we may have some challenges if we don't seriously get on board with our policy, and if we don't seriously get on board with communication, we're going to have challenges meeting our goals. And I believe the next slide is the demand. We are seeing demand increases that we haven't seen in decades. I mean, China, you guys were very young when China started their huge growth period. And back in 2004, when the copper, nickel, all of the boom in metals went nuts, I was just a young analyst at BMO and got to see that firsthand, how the world just boomed. And it was mostly due to the demand in China. Now this is a world, this is unprecedented. It's the world looking for clean energy and looking for battery storage. And the policymakers are starting to understand that. They're talking about it a lot. Now, here's the thing. The policy hasn't caught up with the conversation. So they know that they need critical minerals to meet their targets. But how do we get from here to here when you have 4 years of a consultation period for an existing mine that's denied? What are the bar? What do we need for consultation with Indigenous peoples? What is it? How do we do it? How do you get certainty that if you're going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars in exploration and feasibility studies and roads and all of this types of thing, that you're ultimately going to get a permit? I mean, right now we don't know. So basically, maybe not. That is why there's so many challenges with regards to moving these projects forward. And if we need to talk, and I think it needs to be on a world scale, but maybe I'm a pipe dreamer here, but I'm in mining, we all have to be positive and we all have to be dreamers. I would like the world to talk so that we have the same policy. This is what we need. The world needs metals. If we have the same types of policies, if we've got the same types of regulations, then all of the fear can be taken away. This is what the world is doing towards our mining. This is the regulations that we need. These are the safety guards, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I digress on my dream there, but I think it's possible. I think we're trying, but I think we need to be more specific and energetic to that end. Okay, so I'm going to, I took it out to this, maybe I didn't. Okay, no. Okay, so I'm going to show you the graph because it's more effective. So in order to do this, the COP27 is a net zero. My only point here is that mining needs to be at the table. No one can achieve these goals if mining isn't right there saying, this is what you're going to need, this is how we're going to do it, and this is when we can provide it. Interestingly, what you are seeing is the car manufacturers are at the table, and then they have to go away and say, whoa, wait, I need metals for batteries. And then the conversation circling back to the miners, because they need to supply all that. And guess what? We can't. And I'll tell you why. Look, this is 2021. In order to meet our net zero goals, this is the forecast, we need to have almost triple the amount of nickel production. I mean, that's not only keeping your current, but finding double the amount of nickel mines in the world and have them produce in 2030. And remember, I told you it takes 10 to 20 years to build a mine. How are we going to get there? Right? We need to be at the table here to say, guys, ladies, gentlemen, everybody, we need to talk about where this is coming from in order to achieve these goals. And look at the copper. So, you know, nickel doesn't even have the same quantum. We've got about 2,500 tons of nickel. Okay, well, this is 20 million kilotons of copper. And we have to almost double that. But think about how massive the mines are down in Chile and down in Peru. We have to almost, so let's just say 50% more by that time, including all of the production that they're going to have. It's astronomical. And then look at lithium. I mean, lithium is amazing. It's a pretty specific mineral, but you just saw, and I don't have it here, that Canada, I don't think I put it in, but Canada, how did they put it? Ordered 3 junior companies in Canada to have their Chinese investors divest their investments. Okay, so if you're a junior lithium guy and gal, and you've been trying to finance this mine for years and years and years, and nobody's come to the table. You finally get the Chinese to come to the table to see whether or not there's something here, and then they're ordered to go away. Who's going to come and replace that investment? And guess what? We still need lithium. Okay, so it's a bit of a, okay, so amazing. We're all on board. Now we need to talk. Okay, and then so on this, who's going to come to the table? Who's going to replace the financing? Well, interesting. Think about it. Maybe the car companies, they need the batteries. Governments are really setting lofty goals. And if they're going to say, by the way, you can't have specific investors, Maybe they'll have to come to the table. Non-traditional solutions are likely going to be necessary, and the food chain is going to have to come up. Now, I, tongue-in-cheek, think that people like the Googles, the Yahoos, maybe Yahoo is a bit of a passe, but the Metas, the Amazons of the world are actually going to have to invest in mining companies, because they are the ones with the capital. They are the ones that are utilizing the trucks. They're the ones that are utilizing our downstream products, and they have access to capital. So interesting. I don't know where this is going, but it's going to change, because guess what? The people that you used to finance on Bay Street, where they were in mining stocks, they've gone into crypto, they've gone into cannabis, they've lost their shirt, and they're not necessarily coming back into mining, because it's a 20-year cycle and you don't make any money anymore, generally, at these in this market. The banks, we need them to continue to allow the mining industry to have access to capital. We need them to continue to lend to us. And they have their oil and gas companies, et cetera. There has been a lot of pressure on them to stop lending, to stop provide capital to non-ESG related industries. So when is mining going to be related to that? Is mining going to be lumped into that? Well, I certainly hope not. And I think that the conversation that we're having here is helping the boardrooms of those banks still say, no, we've got to lend to the mining projects, because they're going to help us achieve the goals. And the biggest challenge to capital allocation is the permitting uncertainty. Why would you give me $1 to invest in the ground when you have no idea 10 years from now if we're going to be awarded a permit to build the mine? It's tough, it's tricky. So interesting, the US government is considering investing in Ring of Fire feasibility studies. This is exactly the non-traditional financing that governments are going to have to do if they don't support mining policy. I like this. This is something that this means that people are thinking about where we're going to have these minerals, how do we get the secure ISR? Now, I mean, I don't know if this will actually end up with any money for the feasibility studies, but this is the type of thing that needs to happen. So I'm hopeful that more of this will happen, as far as people understanding how we need to provide the capital to these companies, because they can't do it alone. The traditional sources of financing aren't there, so let's provide some alternatives. I like this. This is happy news. Inflationary pressures are just something that we need to deal with every day and all day, and our cost to take these things out of the ground it's increasing, and we as consumers are going to bear that brunt. The thing that is happening this time around, which hasn't happened in the past, is that we know it. The four of us on the FaceTime here, as far as we can see your face on the Zoom, we know that our cost of goods is going up. And usually when inflationary pressures in the mining industry happen, the consumer, it doesn't get pushed down to the consumer. So maybe there's a light at this tunnel to say, look, we all know it's going to be more, and maybe we'll be able to get that from a pricing, but prices are going to go up for sure. Okay, so the positive trends. World leaders are talking about securing the supply of critical minerals. They are talking, they're worried, they are seriously coming to the table wondering where we're going to get this. And a lot of that has to do with their climate goals, but also the war in Ukraine, Russia invading Ukraine. Russia provides a lot of natural gas, and Ukraine is going to go through a really cold winter, and so might Europe, and that needs to stop. We need to supply critical minerals, especially with regards to the chips that are going into our defense systems, the chips that are going into our cell phones and our batteries, from countries that are not going to go to war and that are not going to have sanctions against them. We are just beginning the conversation, and I hope that it continues and that it will lead to our industry's success. And look, if you're in the equity markets, the price has to go up. It might not be tomorrow at night, it might not be next year, but it has to go up. There are such inflationary pressures, and there's just a significant shortage of the metals. And if we don't have enough, It has to go up. So there might be an opportunity for investment here. And we have to have a mining boom and renaissance in order to meet our demand that we need. So that's all positive. We do need to do some further work. We need the conversation to be honest and transparent around our role in net zero. We have to be at the table. And we as an industry have to take responsibility for that conversation. Can't just put our heads in the sand anymore and say, no, don't look at us. We're just gonna mine and we'll be fine. No, we have to hold our head up high. We have to say what we think. We have to take accountability for what we do wrong. We have to work harder, and we have to say, this is why we deserve the right to mine. If we do that, then we've got a much better chance of being part of the transition and being successful with our mission. And financing must come from alternative and non-traditional sources, because I don't believe that it's still there from the traditional sources. And governments, they're discussing critical minerals, but in my opinion, they have not yet taken real action to change the policy to support the permitting. And that is evidenced by the fact that the Baffin land consultation took 4 years and then was ultimately denied. I would have hoped in that 4 years, there would have been some concrete actions which were relayed to the company and concrete concerns which they could have then incorporated in whatever their plans are, such that they can move forward. And that is what I'm hoping. If it's not, if you can't have the conversation, you can't solve the problem. So let's hope, I really hope we can start to have the conversations that get the politicians to support the policy, because they can talk all they want about critical minerals, but unless they support permitting, unless mines get permitted, we won't have them. And then so my conclusion is I really hope that we start talking, and you guys, this is your country, and you're going to have to pay for all the debt that we have just incurred in during COVID. And the only thing we have is our resources. We've got to develop them. If we do, and if we do it the way we know how as a sector, we will be the world leaders in our values, in our inclusivity, in everything, frankly. And I'm so pleased with people like you, and I'm very optimistic. I've got 3 young children. I have a 9, 9, and 10-year-old. And I think that we're just at the start of our journey. It's going to be bumpy, and it's pretty much an Everest hill, but we'll get there. And it starts with conversations like these. And please have a conversation with your friends and say, we really need you to know that what you're using comes from mining. So please don't say anything bad about it. How about you just get educated about it? So I think we're going to seize the opportunity. And I think that hopefully 5 years from now, we'll be proud again of the role we can play in the world's transition to our carbon neutral economy, which Hannah and I were talking about the 5 feet or 6 feet of snow that Buffalo had the other day. I mean, hey, you want to walk out your front door and have 6 feet of snow overnight, or have a hurricane in Newfoundland coast and your house fall into the sea? Not cool. We want to make sure that we take care of the planet, and to do so, unfortunately, we need to mine, but we can do it. We can do it responsibly. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your presentation. Before I continue on, I'm just going to ask you to stop sharing your screen.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. And I just want to say, I completely agree. It really is a team effort. Everyone has to come together, be willing to have those open conversations. And it is everybody's responsibility at the end of the day. So I love that it's not, a single group and it's all on them. I really love that approach.